morning, pineapple. Looking very good, very nice. Good 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 morning, pineapple. Looking very good, very
Good morning, Rise and Freedom. I'm Austin Peterson. You're watching and listening to the Wake Up America show on the For Liberty Network. Good morning, South Cod, Drew Van Runkle, Cecilia H., Relaxia McGroin, Timo 22, Amy, J.E., C. O'Day, and all of our friends hanging out here on the Wake Up America show. Where else are you guys going to see stuff, content like that? Oh, Tater Salad is going to bless us with something. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. If you thought the world was unstable last year, buckle up, because the wheels are not just wobbling now. They're coming off. You can feel it, can't you? Governments panicking, elites lecturing, institutions losing authority by the day. And the people who broke everything are still standing there with a clipboard, insisting that they know what they're doing. There's nothing to see here. All is well, right? Today's show is one of those mornings when you realize that the problem isn't misinformation. It's that the truth is finally getting loud enough that it can't be ignored. North of the border, something is fascinating is happening in America's hat. In Canada. You're not going to hear about it today on NPR between the tote bag fundraisers. Regular Canadians, especially in Alberta, are openly talking about breaking away. Yes, breaking away, separation, independence. And it's not because they're a bunch of crazy libertarian radicals. All right, it's because they're watching the national government cozy up to China while treating the people who actually fuel the Canadian economy like an inconvenience. Now, when elites start aligning themselves with foreign powers that don't share your values, people tend to notice. And when that happens, loyalty tends to evaporate fast. So we're going to dig into that today because it tells you a lot about where the Western world is headed. And then we're going to come back home where the Department of Justice is now investigating Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey for allegedly interfering with federal immigration enforcement. That's right. The same people who told you the laws were vibes and borders were imaginary are suddenly, they're shocked, I tell you, that there might be consequences to their behavior. It turns out that just yelling sanctuary doesn't magically override federal authority, and the DOJ has decided to test that theory. So later this morning, we're going to zoom out and talk about something even bigger. Whether the so-called West still exists as a real alliance, or whether America is the last adult in the room. I'm going to be joined by Stelios Panagiotou from the Lotus Eaters podcast for a serious discussion about Greenland, Europe, and whether our shared values are real or just something that diplomats say while quietly stabbing each other in the back. And then we're going to have some fun because the left handed us one of the greatest cell phones of the modern era. And when I say self-own, I mean self-own, not cell phone. It's not a cell. They didn't hand us a cell phone. They handed us a self-own. Police body cameras sold to the public as a way to expose the evil racist cops. They ended up exposing something else entirely. Unhinged behavior, constant escalation, and narratives that collapse the second that the footage rolls. So I'll be joined by Perez, who's been watching these videos so you don't have to. And let me tell you, the results are not what the activists ordered. So today is about power, legitimacy, and what happens when ordinary people stop believing the stories they're being told. So the map is changing, the rules are changing, and the people in charge are very nervous about it. You're in the right place. This is Wake Up America. Let's go. What's up, Trump 1420 over on YouTube? You should join us over on Rumble. The water is much better. All right, guys, I'm going to hit pause for just a minute. This is important because if you've ever said, man, I wish I could really actually experience American history instead of just arguing about it online, this is your moment. So we're doing the Peterson's Patriots Boston 250th anniversary tour, May 1st and 2nd, right in the heart of revolutionary Boston. So this is the 250th anniversary of the birth of American liberty, and you're invited to be part of it. So we're walking the Freedom Trail, standing at the Boston Massacre site, visiting the old State House, stepping aboard the Boston Tea Party ships, and finishing with a Sunset Harbor cruise, all with my expert guide, Justin, and yours truly breaking it down the way they don't teach it in schools. So this is not a lecture tour. This is history told with backbone, humor, and pride. So here's how you sign up. Go to forlibertyshop.com. The Boston trip is at the very top of the forlibertyshop.com website, and grab your ticket for the Peterson's Patriots Boston tour. Now, I know what some people are going to say, that ticket seems pricey. Well, if you have kids, all of your kids under 18 are free. And right now, you can save 25% when you buy 2 or more tickets using code Boston2025. Okay, Boston25 is your coupon code. But that deal expires in a few days. So if you want to come and you want to bring more than one person, use that code Boston25 and book your tickets today. We do need at least 10 people registered by the 11th of February for the tour to happen. Otherwise, everyone gets refunded. So if you're in, now's the time. Head to forlibertyshop.com, lock in your spot, and come walk the streets where Americans told tyranny to take a hike. This is a weekend you're going to remember for the rest of your life.
Downtown here, I just watched this guy on a video for 5 minutes talking about how he's such a proud Canadian, you know? So proud to be a Canadian, and he's an Albertan, but he wants to stay part of Canada. What are you fucking proud of? That's what I want to know. Are you proud that single moms and senior citizens on fixed incomes are barely fucking scraping by? Are you proud that over fucking 60% of Canadians are living off their credit cards? People can't afford to fucking put gas in their car to go to work? Can't afford to fucking put their kids in sports anymore because you gotta feed them, you gotta put a roof over their fucking heads. I mean, I do really well, and at the end of the month, I'm like, where the fuck did it all go? So, I mean, hats off to all you people out there that are fucking living on a fixed income, or a single mom, or a single dad, or, you know, somebody that doesn't have a fucking good paying job. I don't know how you're doing it. I fucking don't. I'm disgusted to be a Canadian. We know the East has it out for the West. And all you got to do is look at the equalization map and you'll see where all the fucking money goes. Goes from the West, goes right out to the fucking East, and they fucking give it away to the rest of the fucking world. And the rest of us are just sitting here going, what about Canadians? Seriously, what about seniors? What about our veterans? What about fucking kids? What about the single mom that can't afford to put food on the table? What about these people? Nobody fucking cares about them. I go to the U.S., I meet friendly people everywhere. Canadians are the most fucking ignorant fucking people. Nobody says hi to anybody. Nobody waves at anybody. I go to the States, man, I got people fucking tripping over themselves, come over and say hi and wanting to talk and, you know, where are you from? And not here. I'm not a proud Canadian. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. I'm a disgusted Canadian. I'm a proud Albertan first, and Alberta's either going to pull off separation or she's going to be adios muchachos. Stay triggered, liberals.
All right, guys. So I wanted to, sorry for all the F-bombs, right? We're going to talk about something that the mainstream media is not going to cover today, okay? Because this story is still raw. It's happening right now. It's still being argued about in real time, but this is exactly why we are covering it now. And you're going to see it on the mainstream media a few days from now, okay? You see it on the Wake Up America show before it happens, and then it happens and the mainstream media covers it, right? Alberta, Canada, the oil and cattle province. They've been the economic engine room for a country that often treats it like the annoying cousin who pays the bill at dinner and then gets scolded for chewing too loudly, right? Over the last 2 weeks, a formal citizen initiative petition for an Alberta independence referendum has moved from internet fantasy to an official regulated signature drive with a hard deadline. So there are real people standing in real lines in real winter weather to sign it, right? Elections Alberta, which is the province's election agency, issued the petition for a proposed constitutional referendum. And it's a question that asks, and here's the official wording. Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada to become an independent state? So the signature collection period for this runs January 3rd to May 2nd, 2026, and the campaign needs 177,732 signatures. So Election Alberta describes this as 10% of the total number of votes cast in the 2023 provincial election. They have to submit the sheets by May 2nd, and Elections Alberta says it will verify it within 21 days if submitted on that final date. So this is not vibes. Look at these lines. Okay, this is a procedure. This is the machinery of politics turning on. Now, I know you're thinking, Austin, come on. Maybe this is just a social media tantrum. People post a flag, change their profile picture, and then forget about it, right? But that is not what is happening here, right? Because in Alberta right now, as we speak, the activism has stepped out of the screen and into community halls, right? City News and Global News have reported big lineups at petition signing events, including in Red Deer, where people reportedly were waiting hours to sign in the freezing cold. And in Millet, where City News described the line going out the door, it was later reaching all out near the nearby fire hall. So this is not just one guy with a megaphone in a Facebook group, right? These are real bodies in line, and people can lie online for free. But standing in line in January in Alberta is a different kind of statement. So what is going on? All right, let us slow this down and do this like adults, right? There are two separate things happening at once. One is the legal mechanism, which is the citizen initiative petition, which is real and time bounded. The citizen initiative petition is the big part. What you're seeing people right now in these lines, that's what they're standing in line for. And the other thing that's happening is the kind of social and psychological mechanism, right? Which is the feeling that Alberta has been trapped in an abusive political relationship, that Ottawa just takes and takes and takes, and then lectures about morality when Alberta complains. So globalnews.com quoted petition supporters describing exactly that kind of resentment, right? The sense that these are hardworking, they're treated very poorly by what they call the East, which I think is funny. And now for Americans listening, right, here's the simplest translation for this, right? Imagine a state that generates enormous wealth from energy and agriculture, but the national capital is dominated by people who either hate that industry or who want to strangle it slowly with regulations. And then if the state pushes back, it gets called ignorant, racist, and backwards, right? Imagine that for decades. How could we ever, how would we know what that feels like, right? And then you add this modern information environment. Every grievance is amplified, every insult is archived, and every political betrayal is replayed endlessly on a loop. So that is the recipe. And then when you pour that into this legal process that literally invites citizens to collect signatures to force a referendum, you get the ignition, right? Here's where the story gets interesting, right? This is not just happening in a vacuum, right? Canada has been dealing with Western alienation for a long time. But what you are seeing now is a particular form of it, right? Organized around an actual petition with a fixed target. So they have to get 177,000 signatures by May 2nd. And this is why the social media component matters, because social media, it's not just people complaining, right? The social media has become the logistics system for political mobilization. It's the flyer on your car. It's the phone tree. It's the calendar. It's where people learn that there's a signing event at a community center on Saturday, and somebody tells them to bring ID because Elections Alberta rules, they require canvassers to view identification, proving eligibility, and to witness signatures, which of course is racists. And then of course there's the AI slop. And if I had the right scene on there, you would actually see the AI slop. There we go.
We could lead the world in energy, innovation, and freedom if we had our own country.
$79 for steak. Alberta needs to leave this country.
When Alberta goes independent, we'd pay zero income tax in 5 years. Serious. That's like getting a raise overnight. Mass immigration is breaking the system, and that's why Alberta needs independence. We can build a system that works.
I'm done waiting. The second that independence petition drops, I'm signing it so I have a future.
There we go. Sherry Williams over in the chat says, good luck to them trying to break away from a socialist regime. Absolutely. Excuse me, still a little sick this morning, guys. Lots of sneezes. So let me give you some numbers because you do need a baseline to kind of understand what big looks like in this context. So polling right now does not show a majority for separation. It's not close. All right, Global News cited a research poll that has reported that found that 62% opposed and 31% were supportive, right? With younger adults more supportive than older adults. And some polling put support around 19% back in December of 2025. So those numbers matter because what it tells you is that the petition campaign is kind of fishing upstream. Right? They're trying to turn a minority sentiment into a ballot question by using the legal process. So this is kind of the whole idea of a citizen initiative, right? It's not supposed to show majority support on day one. That's not how it worked for Brexit, and that's not how it's going to work for Alberta independence either, right? It took time for Brexit to and many elections for Brexit to finally come about. It doesn't require a majority support on day one. It's supposed to test whether a motivated minority can become an organized majority, or at least become organized enough to force the question into the agenda. And here's a key factual detail that tells you that it actually is possible. So Election Alberta's own records show that a different citizen initiative petition, which is Alberta Forever Canada, was successful, and it produced hundreds of thousands of signatures, with Elections Alberta reporting over 400,000 verified signatures after sampling. So that proves that the signature mechanism itself is not theoretical. Albertans will sign things. They will mobilize when an issue hits them emotionally. So the right question is not, is Alberta going to separate tomorrow? The right question is, what does it mean that it has moved into official petitioning? And why is it catching fire online and in small cities and in towns at the same time, right? That's what we're going to talk about. Because the deeper story is not Canada. Really, the deeper question is the West. It is legitimacy. It's whether national governments still represent their productive regions or whether they've become ideological management teams that just govern by scolding. Now, let's talk about the social media side of this because, I know you guys love it when I dig deep, and here's what is notable. When a movement is fake, it lives on one platform, in one bubble, and the same 10 accounts recycle the same 10 memes. But when a movement is real, it develops a travel schedule, it develops sign-up instructions, it develops local chapters, and it starts generating third-party coverage from local media that has no ideological interest in flattering it, right? That is what you are seeing. So you have official timelines and thresholds from Elections Alberta. You have local media describing huge lineups in places like Millet and Red Deer. You have activists and campaign accounts using X and Facebook to push schedules. There's calls to action. And you even have X trending summaries describing the petition requirements and reported turnout in very small communities. So citynews.com reported in Millet that Stay Free Alberta hosted an information session inside the hall, and people could sign the petition there. They also reported an important nuance. So Stay Free Alberta described itself as independent from what's called the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is connected to the petition proponent. So that often matters because usually movements will split into different brands, and then those brands compete, but the objective will be the same, gather signatures. So if you want to understand how this gets big, watch whether these brands cooperate or cannibalize each other. And then, of course, there's the legal friction in all of this, which is another indicator of seriousness. So Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation launched legal action against the Alberta government over allowing the independence petition to proceed. They argued that it violates treaty relationships, and other reporting described that First Nations say that the bid violates treaty rights, including Treaty 8. When you start triggering litigation from institutional actors, you are no longer in meme land. You are in the lawyers have entered the chat phrase. Now, I want to address something carefully because you are going to hear a lot of narratives about why this is happening in the coming weeks. I know this is maybe the first time many of you are hearing some of this, but you're going to start hearing this a lot more because now the lawsuits are starting to fly. Now, some people online are connecting this to Canada's prime minister and the alleged alignments against the United States. And I'm going to phrase that as what people are saying because I'm not going to turn into rumor radio, right? The stronger argument, the factual argument, the argument that you can defend is broader and older. Alberta has long-standing grievances about how the Canadian Federation distributes power, money, and energy policy. That is not new. That is not just something that happens because Mark Carney invited a Chinese delegation into America's backyard. All right, this is a very useful data point from the Angus Reid Institute in 2025, talking about separation sentiment in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So they framed it in the context of Premier Danielle Smith presenting demands to the federal government under Prime Minister Mark Carney, especially around oil and gas infrastructure and policy. And they noted that while support for leaving Confederation was still minority, it was not a trivial minority. It was not trivial at all. Some concessions like pipeline infrastructure, removing the emissions cap on Alberta, and repealing some legislation could reduce this separatist sentiment among leavers. The people who want to leave, like the Brexit, or what would you call Canadian Brexit? Crexit? Canexit? What would you call that, right? So this is very important because it kind of tells you what this movement is metabolizing. When real change is being whispered about in the national capital, something is going on in the provinces, right? This is important because energy policy, infrastructure constraints, and then this feeling of that Alberta is politically contained is starting to resonate, right? And this is kind of where I get to have a little bit of fun at the left's expense because the left they have this magical thinking about energy. They talk about Alberta the way they talk about Texas, like it's a moral problem. Like if you just shame the people hard enough, the oil will stop being there, right? Folks, you can do land acknowledgements until your voice gives out. You can hold hands and sing songs to Greta Thunberg. You can get the most terrible haircut in the world. You can issue 40-page climate declarations written by people who have never installed a furnace in their lives. And guess what? The oil is still going to be in the ground, right? The cattle are still going to be on the ground, on the ground, burping and farting. The working class is still going to work. And the people who live in these regions, they have a natural human reaction to being treated like a villain in their own country. They start looking at the door. And that's not ideology, right? It's not just some libertarian separatists who want to do a libertarian experiment in Alberta. This is human nature. And I know what you guys are thinking. Why should my audience care about what happens in Alberta? Well, because Alberta is a case study in what happens when a productive region decides that the political relationship is no longer a partnership, but a hostage situation. And of course, in America, we have many regions that feel that way, i.e. Texas. Right, the difference, of course, is that Alberta has a legal mechanism right now that can turn their resentment into signatures on paper. So let me give you the state of play as of now. Right, as of now, in factual terms, the petition exists. It has a proponent named by Elections Alberta as Mitch Silvestri. It has a signature requirement of 177,000, and it has a collection window from early January to May 2nd. So it requires registered canvassers, ID checks. It's going to be verified by the election agency after submission, and they are generating real-world lineups that the local media, who has, again, no ideological interest in seeing this go forward, the local media is reporting that it is significant, okay? So that is enough to treat this as a live event. This is a live political event happening right now. This is not an internet curiosity and rumor mill, okay? Now, I'm going to connect this to the larger theme of today's show because the point is not that Albertans are uniquely angry. The point is that the Western world is showing cracks along the same fault lines everywhere. So national capitals versus productive provinces, ideology versus reality, elite narratives versus lived experiences. And when those cracks widen, separatism becomes a language people used to say, you do not represent me. Now, sometimes it's a bluff, sometimes it's a bargaining chip, but sometimes, and in the case of Canada, in Alberta, it becomes a real movement. And good for them. Bully for you. Yeah. Lawyers entering the chat. The Noel M says left wing has always tried to shame anyone that goes against them. Billions of money have gone to X, example, Quebec. Very true, Noel. Hey, Noel, are you from Canada? Or are you just a Canadian enthusiast? Now, because we're not children, right, we should talk about the barriers to this. They're the practical barriers. So let's suppose that the petition succeeds. Let's say that they get the signatures. Elections Alberta verifies them, and the province is pushed towards holding a referendum. What then? Well, this is where a lot of dreamers are going to hit the wall. Okay, separating from a country is not like unsubscribing from a newsletter, right? You don't just click unfollow like on AP for Liberty's Wake Up America show Rumble stream. Don't do that. And then suddenly we disappear, right? It's not going to happen, right? There are constitutional questions, treaty questions, debt and asset questions, citizenship questions, trade questions, defense questions, and most importantly, legitimacy questions, right? Canada is not going to casually accept the loss of its most energy-rich province. And Alberta is not going to casually accept a long negotiation where Ottawa uses delay as a weapon, right? And that is why this story matters, because even if the end state is not independence, say, the movement itself is kind of a lever. It will force concessions. So something good can come of this that isn't necessarily the end goal of what Albertan independence movement people want. Noel says he's from Western Canada, real Canada, we call it. Well, Noel, hey, welcome to the show. And how did you find us, brother? We'd love to hear how you managed to make your way into our group here. We'd love to hear from you. And please share more of your thoughts on this, right? So because even if the end state of this, right, doesn't end in independence, the movement can get good things for their people. It forces concessions. It forces attention. It forces fear into the hearts of the media elite. And then it's forcing them to cover things that they would prefer to ignore. Right? And this is why the first legal challenge for the legal challenge from the First Nations is relevant, because if Sturgeon, Lake Cree Nation, and others argue that treaty relationships cannot be altered by a province acting alone, and if the courts take that seriously, then the pathway to any legal separation, of course, becomes much more complicated. So that complexity can either slow the movement down or radicalize it further, right? Depending on how people kind of interpret the obstacles. So let me give you a clean timeline that you can kind of hang this segment on. January 2nd, 2026, right? Just a couple of weeks ago, Elections Alberta announces the petitions have been issued. Signature collection began on January 3rd. The campaign has 120 days and must submit the official signature sheets by May 2nd. Elections Alberta says it will verify within 21 days of submission, which is basically late May. So those are your fixed points. Everything else is just persuasion, social media campaigning, a lot of AI slop, and turnout, right? So 177,000 signatures, that sounds huge until you realize that Alberta has millions of residents and nearly 3 million electors. So Elections Alberta's own page shows registered electors in the province around 2.96 million. So the signature threshold is meaningful, but it's not insane. The Alberta Forever Canada petition did far more than its required threshold, and it was successful. So the question is not, can signatures be collected? The question is, can they be collected for this question in this window with ID requirements and with legal challenges and counter mobilization? The funniest part of modern politics is how shocked the professional class becomes when regular people use the rules that professionals wrote. They love democracy when it's a petition about banning plastic straws. They love, quote, people power when it's a march with matching signs made by a nonprofit that has a corporate sponsor. But when a bunch of middle-class Albertans in a community hall decide to sign a petition that threatens the national project, suddenly the elites discover concerns and risks and misinformation and extremism, which the translation is, you peasants are voting wrong. And this is not just Canada. This is the West. This is what happens when legitimacy drains out of institutions. People go looking for something that feels more direct, more local, more accountable, right? In America, it shows up as a state resistance to federal overreach. In Europe, it shows up as nationalist parties and regional movements. In Canada, it's showing up as Alberta asking openly whether their deal with Canada still makes sense. Now, not everybody signing the petition, of course, is a full-blown separatist, right? Many people who were quoted in line that they interviewed saying that they wanted change, right? Some wanting Alberta to have more say, like Quebec. Some saying they want to separate from the East, and others are just treating this as a way to force Ottawa to pay attention. That is normal. Petition movements often include true believers and then strategic signers. The true believers want the end state. The strategic signers want leverage over the capital. And this is kind of the geopolitical edge that is going to tie back to our more separatist instincts, perhaps. Even if you cannot prove every viral claim about Ottawa and China, the underlying fear is real, that national leaders will choose global alignments, global priorities, and global moral posturing over the concrete interests of their own people, including their own allies like the United States. And that creates a crisis of solidarity. And when the solidarity dies, separatism becomes plausible. So for the Americans listening to this, file this under a warning and a lesson. You cannot run a country by humiliation. You cannot treat productive regions like a piggy bank and then call them morally inferior. You cannot build unity on contempt for your people. Unity has to be earned. And when the center fails to earn it, the periphery starts writing its own future. Now, before we close and talk about Canada and China, let me give you a few watch items to track over the next 2 months. Noel, I think you'll like this. Maybe you know this more than we do. Right, so number one, watch the signature pace. So we do not have verified daily counts, but local events, lines, and the frequency of signing sessions, they are a proxy. If you see events multiplying and lines staying long, then the petition is alive. And then number two, watch the counter mobilization. Elections Alberta shows that Alberta Forever Canada was successful and it got hundreds of thousands of signatures. So that means that the pro-Canada side, they have organizing capacity too. So if they start aggressively campaigning against the independence petition, they can blunt the momentum or force a clearer debate. Right? Number three, watch the legal challenges from First Nations and how provincial and federal actors respond. Because if courts issue injunctions or rulings that constrain the process, the movement may either stall or it may harden. So that legal layer is a very key variable. So, okay, this has been a huge thing of discussion here. So let me just land this plane with a big idea, because this is what makes this worth the last 36 minutes of me rambling on this, right? Alberta is not just a Canadian story. It is a legitimacy story. It is a story about what happens when people conclude that the political center views them as a resource to be managed rather than citizens to be represented. It's a story about how social media changes politics, and making anger actionable. It gives these movements a schedule. It gives them a map. It gives them a distribution system. It gives them velocity. And it also, frankly, is a story about how the left has overplayed its hand across the West. When you build an ideology that treats energy production as sin, borders as hateful, nationalism as evil, and working class pride as suspect, you eventually produce a backlash that is not polite. It's not academic. This is not going to be a panel discussion at Davos, right? It is people saying the F word many, many times into their cameras, sitting in their trucks, right? It is a petition clipboard. It's bigger than the Freedom Truckers convoy, right? Sometimes it's the political equivalent of throwing tea into the harbor. Now, will Alberta become independent? I don't know, right? I'm not going to pretend I can see the future. But what I can tell you is that the mechanism for it is real. The timeline is real. The signature threshold is real. And the mobilization, at least, is real enough that local news has had to cover long lines and crowded events. Elections Alberta has put official numbers and dates on the board, and the clock is ticking to May 2nd. And I'll tell you what else is real. The appetite for this. Across the Western world, for people to reclaim agency from distant capitals, you damn right people are hungry for that. That is the deeper current. That is what ties this all back to American politics. I mean, you can sneer at this, you can lecture it, you can call it populism, extremism, whatever your grant-funded vocabulary wants to call it, but you cannot make this go away by scolding it. The only thing that deflates separatism is responsible governance. If Ottawa wants to keep Alberta, it has to make the deal feel fair again. It cannot. If it can't, then this petition is just the beginning. All right, so we're going to keep tracking this story. We're going to watch the petition timeline. We'll watch the turnout. We'll watch the legal challenges. And we'll watch whether or not Canada's political class responds with wisdom or with contempt, because contempt, that is the fuel of fracture. And to my American listeners, remember, when you see a movement like this, don't just point and laugh, guys. This is not just some foreign melodrama. You should ask what this means, what this reveals about the West right now. Ask what it reveals about the relationship between governments and the governed in our own country, and ask whether your own country is building unity through respect or building resentment through arrogance, right? All right, guys, so we're going to talk about this in just a few minutes. Thank you very much for listening to all this. I hope that my Canadian friends in the chat found this handy. Noel says the Yukon just had an election and voted right-wing and no, not extreme. Finally, organizing is the key. Says members of parliament, Alberta has 43, Ontario 122, Quebec over 70. No fairness in elections. That's good information. Thank you very much for that, Noel. And thank you for joining us. Forgive me, I'm still pretty sick and trying to get over a cold, guys, so I'm very dry. I'll have to take little breaks and lube up with some water. Also want to remind you guys, we do have bonus content for you today for you to unlock. If you would like to see our bonus content, we produce a 5-minute mini documentary every day, and it's a little treat for you guys. If you'd like to support the show financially, can you bless me with something?
Can you bless me with something?
Oh, gosh. Money-wise.
Please.
Can you suck it?
What?
Wake Up America show has our own For Liberty shop. Coffee, tea, and water. Trying to stay hydrated. Head to forlibertyshop.com and get yourself some coffee this morning, guys. We've got some revolutionary roasts. If you've never tried Founding Flavors coffee, you're missing out on the best tasting coffee in the world. When you go to forlibertyshop.com and you click on over to the coffee page, you'll find my top 3 favorite Founding Flavors coffee. Because if you've never tried our coffee before, we put together this bundle for you all to enjoy so that you can try which coffee you might like and see which one you want to subscribe to monthly, of course. These are my top 3. The number 1 best-selling product of all time at the shop is Jeffersonian Java. Founding Flavors coffee, Jeffersonian Java. It's a light roast, and I think people love it not just because it's Thomas Jefferson's coffee, although that has something to do with it. But also they love it because that light roast means more caffeine. So you get a nice jolt if you're trying to start your day the American way. And it comes with a beautiful image of Jefferson and Monticello. If you have this sitting on your desk at work, people are going to ask where you got it. They're going to want to try it. And then they're going to get hooked. And maybe they'll even come over here and join us on the Wake Up America show 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. Support the Wake Up America show with your purchases at forlibertyshop.com. Every purchase that you make during the live show goes to help unlock our bonus content. When we raise $100 on the Wake Up America show, either in tips that you make on Rumble, or if you make purchases during the live show, then every dollar that you spend during the live show goes to help unlock that bonus content. So if we get some people buying some coffee, it won't be very long. And of course, remember that the prices that you see include shipping, so you don't have to get that sticker shock at the very end. Noel M. reminds us of the genius of the Electoral College when he says that U.S. has your electoral college, but balancing out huge populations in various states. Yes, we are so very lucky to have an electoral college in the United States. They don't have that in Canada. Barney Style says, I'm not entirely sure AP understands his role in the Can You Bless Me With Something clip. Oh, no, I do.
Can you bless me with something?
Oh, God.
Money-wise? Please.
Can you suck it?
By the way, name pronouncing Noel, also female. Sorry, guys. Oops, sorry, Noel. Was I saying Noel? I have a cold. Apologies. Noel. Nice to see you, ma'am. Thank you for joining us today on the Wake Up America show. I didn't see. Did you tell us how you found us? Was it just because of the Canada story that you managed to find us today, Noel? Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We're glad and grateful to have you here. We've got two incredible guests coming up on the Wake Up America show today. From one from Europe, one from the United States. Stelios Panagiotou will be joining us live at 8 a.m. Central on the Wake Up America show. We were having an interesting conversation over the weekend. He was deeply concerned about Donald Trump's behavior in laying tariffs on countries that were opposing our acquisition of Greenland and saying that the West needs to stand united. And I was responding to him by saying that it feels as if the United States has been standing alone for a very long time and that we don't really have any Western allies. So he was disagreeing with me on that. So we're going to have a fascinating conversation on the Wake Up America show. And he is from the Lotus Eaters podcast. He'll be joining us live here in about 15 minutes on the Wake Up America show. Then at 8:30 a.m., comedian Lou Perez wrote an article about how the left's position on bodycams backfired. He wrote a great piece over on Pirate Wires. I just reposted him over on X. So if you want to grab the link to that. Oh, actually, you know what I'll do? I've got it right here in front of me. So I'll just go ahead and drop it in the chat for you guys if you want to read that. We're going to talk. And if you have questions about it, of course, feel free to let us know. You can send us text messages on that number that you see at the bottom of the screen, 573-319-1586. That's 573-319-1586.
I absolutely love irony. There's something deeply ironic about our Prime Minister going to this country to build a deeper relationship with this country. Because everything that Canadian liberals think America is what this country actually is. This country is literally an authoritarian police state that uses violence to oppress religious and ethnic minorities that does not allow for freedom of speech. This is also a country that violently pollutes the world. There's literally no care about environmental standards, recycling, or using renewables. They even have fleets of government-sanctioned fishing boats scouring the oceans, destroying entire fish populations. This is a country that sends agents to intimidate Canadians on Canadian soil. A country that has been caught attempting to interfere in our elections. A country that is linked to our fentanyl crisis. A country that has literally kidnapped Canadian citizens and held them hostage for over 1,000 days. This is a country that actually treats us poorly and is actually a threat to the world. But sure, let's build a deeper relationship with them because we think America is bad.
Good stuff. All right, guys. So this is not just a small diplomatic story, right? This is not just trade talks. This is about loyalty, sovereignty, and whether the West still understands who its enemies are. So Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney just flew to Beijing and rolled out the red carpet for the Chinese Communist Party, okay? Not quietly, not begrudgingly, enthusiastically, Mark Carney met with Xi Jinping and praised a new strategic partnership and openly signaled that Canada is recalibrating away from the United States and China, our neighbor, our supposed ally, inviting the primary geopolitical adversary of the West into our hemisphere like it's a friendly business mixer.
The fourth pillar of our new strategic partnership is public safety and security. And this is an area where pragmatic and constructive engagement with China is crucial. Through this pillar, our law enforcement agencies will increase cooperation to better combat narcotics trafficking, transnational crime, cybercrime, synthetic drugs, and money laundering. And we will create safer communities for people in both our countries.
Now, Carney, he didn't just talk about trade and partnerships to end drug trafficking. right? He talked about a new world order. Those were his words. A world where Canada positions itself not around Western unity, not around American leadership, but around, quote, global realities, which of course is elite code for appeasement, right? This wasn't Canada being dragged into something. This was Canada volunteering, right? And if you're an American who cares about borders, alliances, or basic geopolitical sanity, this should set off alarm bells, right? Because China is not neutral. China is not a misunderstood partner. China is an authoritarian regime that steals intellectual property, floods markets with subsidized goods, coerces smaller nations, and openly prepares for conflict with the United States. And Mark Carney decided this was the perfect moment to welcome them into the Western backyard.
Prime Minister Brian Platt with Bloomberg News. Yesterday when you met with Premier Lee, one of the things you said in the public remarks was this partnership, Canada and China, this new partnership sets us up well for the new world order. What did you mean by that? What is the new world order?
Well, it's a great question, Brian, because I think the world is still determining what that order is going to be. And let's be clear what we're talking about first and foremost, which is what are the trading, what is going to govern global trade? What is the role of the WTO going to be? How important are bilateral deals such as the one we're developing, plurilateral deals, if I can use that term, Trans-Pacific Partnership, potential linkages between Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU? Where is financial regulation, payment system regulation going to fit into that? All of these aspects, I'm going to use a fancy word, like the architecture, the multilateral system that has been developing these is being eroded, to use a polite term, undercut, use another term. So the question is, what gets built in that place? How much of a patchwork is it? How much is it just on a bilateral basis? Or where do like-minded countries in certain areas? So like-minded countries, just to be clear, doesn't mean you agree on everything. Aspects, for example, on digital trade or agricultural trade, climate finance as another area, to move into areas of geostrategy, geosecurity.
So Carney, he kind of framed this pivot away from the United States and to China as necessary because he says the United States is unreliable, right? That Canada has to hedge against American leadership by building closer ties with Beijing, right? This is Canada saying out loud, it no longer views the United States as the anchor of Western stability. Now, at the same time, China immediately rewarded Canada with symbolic purchases and glowing state media praise. And that's how you know who won the meeting, right? Beijing does not praise you unless you conceded something meaningful. Now, let's zoom out because this story, it connects directly to the Alberta, Greenland, and the broader fracture that we're talking about today. So China has strategic interests in the Arctic. It wants shipping lanes. It wants minerals. It wants influence in northern infrastructure. And Canada sits right in the middle of that map. And instead of standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States and NATO, Canada just told China, let's cooperate. And that matters because cooperation in Chinese foreign policy always means access to markets, access to institutions, access to decision makers. It starts with trade and it ends with leverage. This is how China operates everywhere, from Africa, Eastern Europe to Southeast Asia. And while Canada is busy courting Beijing, it's simultaneously lecturing America about nationalism, border enforcement, and sovereignty. The hypocrisy from Canada these days is breathtaking. Canada is happy to undermine U.S. enforcement, happy to posture against American energy independence, but perfectly comfortable inviting a hostile authoritarian regime into its economic and strategic orbit. That is not what allies do. Allies coordinate. Allies align. Allies don't freelance with adversaries and call that pragmatism. This kind of elite globalism is exactly why separatist movements are exploding inside China, in Canada. When people in Alberta see Ottawa bowing to Beijing while strangling their energy sector, they don't see leadership, they see betrayal.
I believe The progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order. And I believe
all right. So let me land this cleanly, okay? Because this is not about hating Canada. This is about reality. The West is in a Cold War, whether our elites will admit it or not. And in a Cold War, alignment matters. You don't get to play both sides without consequences. You don't get to invite the wolf into the yard and still claim that you're guarding the fence. Mark Carney made his choice. He chose globalism and communism over alliance. He chose access to Chinese markets over his loyalty to Western partners. He chose elite applause over geopolitical clarity, and that choice will have ripple effects, not just in Canada, but across North America. For us Americans, the lesson is simple. We cannot assume alignment anymore. We cannot outsource our security to, quote, shared values that evaporate the moment trade incentives appear. Sovereignty matters, borders matter, and alliances only matter if they're actual alliances. China is not a partner to the West. It is a challenger to it. And any government that pretends otherwise is either naive or dishonest. Canada just told us where they stand. The question is now whether Americans, whether the United States is paying attention. Coming up live in 5 minutes, Stelios Panagiotou says the West is still together. And I say that the West stands alone in the United States. We'll talk to him in less than 5.
He doesn't want to fuck around with the United States.
He comes in, does nothing but bitch.
We'll be right back with Stelios Panagiotou from across the pond. It's the Wake Up America show, and you're watching the 4 Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
And what is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways?
Tired of spending your hard-earned money on woke corporations that don't share your pro-freedom values? Fed up with sipping liberal lattes and progressive cappuccinos? Introducing Founding Flavors from AP for Liberty Shop. Get your day started with Washington's Revolutionary Roast. As robust and principled as the man himself, this blend is the shot of energy heard round the world. Or maybe you want to taste the fervor of freedom with Adams's Patriotic Perk. It's as dynamic and balanced as the U.S. Constitution, sure to awaken your spirit of liberty. For the aficionados, we've got the Jeffersonian Java, a complex mix of flavors that speaks volumes about your refined tastes. And don't forget Betsy's Liberty Lullaby, our decaf option, crafted with the same care and dedication Betsy Ross put into our Star-Spangled Banner. This blend lets you enjoy the taste of freedom anytime without losing sleep. No woke beans here, folks. Just pure, patriotic, pro-freedom flavors brewed with love for liberty. So why compromise your principles for a cup of coffee? Stand up for your values, perk up your patriotism, and start your day the American way. Get your founding flavors at apforlibertyshop.com. When the Founding Fathers dreamed of liberty, they forgot one thing: coffee. Introducing Founding Flavors Coffee, the brew that built America, and the brew that's fueling a new revolution, one kitchen at a time. Small batch roasted, Patriot approved, and disappearing faster than a redcoat at Yorktown. Don't get left behind, soldier. Real patriots are starting their mornings with Founding Flavors. And trust us, freedom tastes better with a fresh cup in your hand. Stop drinking those tyrant brews who take your money and don't support your values. Stocks are limited, demand is booming.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm English, and I love England. I like having fish and chips and a pint at the local pub. I like Shakespeare and Dickens, Tolkien and Lewis, Harry Potter. I like pork sausage and dogs and fashion.
Haram! Haram!
But I don't like that.
That's
Brits
the famous,
are famously polite.
now famous Amelia meme tearing up the internet. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Before we bring in our guest, we need to kind of frame the stakes because this story is much bigger than Greenland. Over the past several weeks, Europe and the United States have been drifting further apart in ways that the political class keeps pretending are temporary or cosmetic, but they're not. We've seen European leaders openly threatening economic retaliation against the United States, Canada pivoting its trade and diplomatic posture towards China, and growing resistance inside NATO countries to aligning with American strategic priorities. So Greenland sits right at the center of this tension. It's not just an icy rock. It is a strategic choke point for Arctic shipping lanes, rare earth minerals, missile defense, and North Atlantic security. So as climate change opens Arctic routes and great power competition intensifies, Greenland's value has exploded. The question is no longer whether Greenland matters. The question is whether America can still rely on allied consensus to secure its interests, or whether we've entered a new era where nations pursue self-interest openly and alliances become transactional at best. So that is the reality we are confronting today, and it forces an uncomfortable but necessary debate about Western unity versus American sovereignty. Joining me now is Stelios Panagiotou, who sparked a serious debate online by warning that aggressive moves on Greenland could fracture the West and deepen U.S.-Europe rivalry. Stelios argues preserving Western unity matters more than unilateral action, and today we're going to test that argument against the reality on the ground. Stelios from the Lotus Eaters podcast, welcome to the show.
Hi, Austin. I'm very happy to be joining you again. This is my third time on your show. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm sure this is going to be a good faith discussion.
These are great conversations. It's nice to have a good faith discussion, Stelios. Go ahead, respond to what I was just talking about.
Yes. So I want to say a few things to also frame my position so your audience understands it a bit better. I want to say what I am not saying. I'll start with this, and then I'll say a few things about what it is that I am deeply committed to. Right. So I am not saying that under any circumstances should the US purchase Greenland. I'm not saying this. There have been land purchases before. There are several, I think 6 or 7 big land purchases in US history. The last one was, I think, 109 years ago, the Virgin Islands. Then there was Alaska before. So I'm not saying that the US should never purchase Greenland. What I was hinting at was that I think the way Trump goes about it right now is much more likely to create more troubles than it solves. Not just for the US, but also for what we loosely call the Western world. We can have a general discussion about what the Western world is a bit later, but let me just say in a few words, I think that we never left, in a way, what you said. You said that we are entering into a world where nations pursue their own interests. I think we never left that. And there is a question there as to what sort of alliances one can have and should have in order to promote their own interests. And that's why I think that the Western world, or countries that have a relatively speaking shared framework of values we loosely call Western values, are really good for sticking together. And it is usually when you see people trying to promote values that are completely different and foreign to, let's say, the US or Europe, that this is usually a sign of a psyop. And we saw many of them lately. So that's what I was saying.
Understand it completely, Stelios, and because we actually have good faith conversations here, I'll take that at face value. The deep concern that I think many Americans have who are just sort of waking up to the question of Greenland and its importance to American national security is the inability of Europe to defend itself or even defend its own national borders. Right? It would be nice in an ideal world if Greenland had the capability and the will and the desire to be able to defend Greenland from incursions against Russia and China, but it clearly does not. Europe has been signaling weakness for decades, and now we're sort of looking at our quote-unquote friends across the ocean and wondering if you even have the capability to defend Greenland against incursions from China, Russia. Those are real national security questions that have nothing to do with ideology. You could understand why leaders in the United States would say, these people are clearly incapable of defending it. I mean, look at how little the response has been even to the grumblings that the United States has made. I mean, how many soldiers have these, I think the UK sent, 1? Germany sent like 10 people. I mean, when you look at something like that, it doesn't give us a lot of confidence that you're even capable of defending yourselves, let alone defending a massive a massive amount of land in Greenland, which is in American national security interests. How do you respond to that?
Right. So first of all, I think Trump and the U.S. does have some points when it comes to European defense systems, and this is also an argument that I deeply share with you as a Greek, because Greece is one of the very few NATO countries who are spending more than the amount that is the agreed upon. I think it's 4% of your GDP. We're spending way more than that because we have Turkey as our neighbor. So yes, it is an absolute fact that several countries in Europe have, let's say, outsourced their defense to the US. Or not exactly outsourced, but they have been very relaxed. This is a fact. I'm not denying this. And if what Trump is doing is actually going to make them wake up and start taking European security more seriously, I'm going to be very happy. I'm going to be very happy about this. I think that to some extent, there has been an exaggeration of the idea that the US gets nothing from having air bases in other countries in the US. But at the end of the day, if it's your land, you have to defend it. I understand this. Now, when it comes to Greenland specifically, we are not talking about a large land of ice that is, let's say, foreign to the US or hostile to the US, and the US has zero presence in it, and Trump comes with the annexation talk and the imperialistic talk or the invasion talk, because there is already military presence of the US in Greenland. Let me have you here. Let me show you. There is the 1951 Defense of Greenland Agreement, where the US maintains the Pituffik Space Base. And this treaty allows for extensive US military presence and early warning systems, though Denmark remains the sovereign power. And there is also commercial invitation. So there is invitation to collaborate. So if Trump invaded Greenland, that's the point, he would be invading an ally who is inviting him to the table to do business with him. And this is something that is problematic, independent of whether you think that the EU takes its defense seriously or not. Because if you want to be a geopolitical player, and the US is a major geopolitical player. If a major geopolitical player has to have allies, if you want to exert influence in spaces, if for any other reason allies give you intel. I think there was substantial Israeli intel, for instance, during Operation Midnight Hammer in mid-June 2025. So allies give you intel for just for any other reason. So if Trump invades Greenland, he would be destroying NATO, and also he would be discrediting the voice of the office of the US president for existing and prospective alliances, because forming alliances is a major part of geopolitics, and trust is really important. So I don't see how he thinks he gets much more of it than lose more of it, which makes me a bit skeptical.
Well, I understand, but you might be underestimating the desire on behalf of Americans for complete and total independence, right? If threatening to remove for NATO to fall apart is not something that really terrifies the American right. American conservatism is baked in with libertarianism, and we are very desirous for NATO to either put up or to shut up, for them to either step up and fund these programs for their own national security, because we are sick and tired of being lectured from haughty Europeans about their socialized healthcare system while they sit under the cloak of our national security, right? So here's the thing, you warned that resentment from Europeans would be a strategic mistake, but resentment, it's already baked in, right? Regardless of what the United States does, simply because America is more powerful and decisive. So threats of resentment is not something that really terrifies us, because we're always going to be hated and resented because of our status as the lone superpower in the world. Isn't that the case?
Right. So, first of all, I wasn't threatening anyone.
No, but
let me say this.
Sure.
But let me say this. I think when it comes to resentment and negative feeling and criticism, on every side, it's a game of numbers. You could see it it's not just an issue of foreign policy and foreign people bad-mouthing the US for its status. You could also say it's part of the American left. The American left can't shut up about how evil the US is, the same way they can't shut up about how evil Europe has been, and European civilization and whiteness, etc. So it's a game of numbers. In every place, due to that status as a superpower, there are going to be people who are going to be against the US, there are going to be people who are pro-US. But one thing here is that it seems to be the case that in several countries, and I'll give you the example of Canada, Australia, and I'll go to Europe, it seems that Trump has, there are already pro-US voices. There are people who say, yeah, the same way you don't like Bernie Sanders and AOC telling you stuff about how, you know, the most interesting thing, the best thing in life is socialized, is having a huge welfarism. The same way we don't like it. And we want to do business with you, and we want to be closer to you. And we also want to be closer to the ideas of Javier Milei that I see him on your mic. So it is a game of number, and there are people across several countries who do want to be pro-US in the Western camp. So like in Canada, Poilievre was closer to Trump. When Trump started doing the 51st state talk, Poilievre tanked. And now you have Mark Carney as a neighbor who is closer to China, and you could have Pierre Poilievre. This also happened to an extent in Australia. The Conservatives in Australia were heading the polls, and then this kind of talk in the same way sort of led to a Labour win there. And here we have lots of people. So as someone who is Greek European in England, I also see that there are lots of people here who are pro-US. Sorry, I hated when, for instance, Keir Starmer, the PM of the the UK, goes out and says the best thing about England is the NHS. This is exactly the same way you hate the Europeans who badmouth the US and they say about socialized healthcare. I and lots of my friends do the same with Europeans for these countries. So it seems to me to be right now in the global geopolitical sphere a battle between let's say, liberal and classical liberal, you may call them libertarian camp, and the sort of Islamo-leftist alliance. So what I was saying is that I see this as having several bad effects, not necessarily intentional, but it seems to, in the same way it worked in Canada and Australia for pro-China, let's say, and pro-Islamo-leftist sides, I think it may happen also in Europe, and because it gives them the sort of fake argument that, yeah, you're fake patriots, you're fake nationalists, you're just Trump MAGA cheerleaders.
It's a deep challenge.
I think we have
I understand the challenge that you all face, and certainly we would be better off if right-wingers were to take control of the governments in Europe, but they are such a tiny minority. And even the right-wingers in Canada, for example, the person that you're discussing, Pierre Poilievre, right? They're not conservative in the way that Americans are conservative. There is a truly unique feature of American libertarianism that is, what you call classical libertarianism, I like to call it perhaps a cowboy conservatism, that is a desire for true independence. And it's not an isolationist sentiment necessarily, right? It is, but it very much is a willingness for Americans to go it alone, even if we have no allies. So my question is this, if Europe were truly committed to a unified West, why are countries like Canada and key EU states, why are they actively deepening their economic ties with China, even though China is clearly acting at it? All of the things that Europe and Canada are accusing the United States of doing, China actually does. So if Europe, if Canada, if they are truly United States' allies, why are they deepening their ties to China?
Right. So one small reframing. I don't think that the right wingers in Europe don't have the numbers. They do have numbers, and they are rising. Right. But let's keep that aside. I think to an extent, we need to look at globalization. And I know you're a free trade advocate and also a tariff critic in some respects. I think if we look at the philosophy of trade, trade deepens ties. And the more trade became globalized, the more the global ties started forming. And the more, you could say, China and Russia and other countries, they industrialized and they increased their economic output, the more they were able to trade with other countries. So to a degree, yes, there is trade and there are economic ties. But the question is, when there is such an economic tie and the US wants to sort of break that, how is alienating Europe to a greater extent going to offset that instead of deepen those ties? And instead of let's say strategically, because there are people who are saying that what Trump is trying to do now is to isolate China by sort of teaming up with Russia in a way and landlocking China. How would that work if for seemingly no reason? Because again, as I was saying, it's not that there aren't economic ties with Greenland. He pushes the economic integration between the EU and China. And let me say back before what you said about independence. Yeah, I totally get it, because I get your philosophy, and you know I do. We have discussed it about before. But this kind of independence is, I don't understand how this independence is being compromised by forming alliances. If forming alliances, when you form alliances, there are people who don't do their part of the deal, then yes, there's an argument there to be made that you are not honoring your side of the deal, I'm not going to honor mine. But there is always the question of whether there is an exaggeration and whether, it's an issue of leadership or of people. And it seems to me that that there isn't this anti-Americanism in Europe. It's not as prevalent as you may think it is.
It seems very prevalent. And I think America does value alliances. But as we've seen recently with the black bagging of Maduro, America seems to be on a path towards building alliances and friendships within our hemisphere. You've probably heard Donald Trump talking about the Don Roe Doctrine, right? The revival of Americanism in the Western Hemisphere. Americans, I think, at least within the Republican Party, many of them have either entirely or are beginning to entirely write off Europe as a useful ally in world affairs because of their deepening economic ties and diplomatic ties to nations that are belligerent. And because of the, I guess, I'm not trying to be too unkind in my assessment of Europe, but your inability to defend yourselves from the Russian threat in Ukraine is deeply concerning when we consider that Greenland has strategic national security interest to the United States. So we look at Greenland, perhaps, and if we're fully informed in what it means for our national security when it comes to missile defense, when it comes to control of rare earth minerals, Europe seems entirely incapable of defending itself. And then also from an ideological perspective, seems to be ideologically aligning itself against the United States. Then when we look at South America, we see valuable allies rising in Argentina. You mentioned Javier Milei. We see the possibility of a free Venezuela. We see the possibility that Cuba itself might fall. We see Alberta with independence movements. And Americans, by and large, are ignorant when it comes to geography. And it's not because we're stupid. It's because we don't need to know about geography for the most part, right? That's something that we leave to our elites. Because for most Americans, splendid isolationism is the way that they live their lives. Many of them don't even know the geography fully of the states that they live in. But what I'm trying to say here is that if America continues to act as if our alliances are sacred, regardless of what the outcomes are, and the outcomes have not been that great, doesn't that incentivize our allies to extract benefits without contributing proportionately to shared defense and risk? In other words, you are celebrating the fact that Greece is contributing more of its GDP to NATO, but other NATO countries are not incentivized. How can we, without being too belligerent, incentivize you all to contribute more to your own national defense and your securities without belligerence, without kicking you all in the ass a bit to get up and to start kicking in for your own national security. And when we see how you treat the invasion of Russia and Ukraine, and then you compare it to how you acted when we made moves towards Greenland, all of a sudden everybody gets up in arms. So what's the benefit to the United States for being a good, reliable partner when it doesn't feel like we're getting much from this benefit from this partnership, and we get the increased hostility and the attitude of Europeans that we're all just stupid Americans? I mean, do you understand? I mean, this is kind of a big question, Stelios, but maybe you can narrow it down for me.
Yes. So I think there is a clear answer to this. So number one, because as I said before, what Trump does is going to wake up Europeans to take their defense more seriously in the form of what he said, that, just kick their asses a bit so they wake up. I think that would be a good thing. And I don't suffer from TDS. Don't say that anything he does is a bad thing. I will say when it comes to just to take this out of the way, when it comes to Europeans who, as you say, look down to some Americans, I think this has much more to do with the leftist temperament. Leftists are always the same across the globe. Leftists hate the U.S. because of its action, its history, and its philosophy. And they do the same for when it comes to Europe. Now, with respect to Greenland, I appreciate the argument. I think that that's a strong argument there. But there is a very clear answer with respect to what the U.S. profits from this. Right. So you tell me that on the one hand there is a rivalry between U.S., China, and Russia, and there is fear, for instance, that Russia or China could, let's say, take control of Greenland and install nukes there or something, whatever, and try to repeat something like the Cuban Missile Crisis. I appreciate this. If we go to realpolitik, and let's just say it really doesn't matter, ideology doesn't matter, let's just go to strict Machiavellianism. Machiavelli says one thing, which is really, which you can see it playing out in history all the time. If you want to exert influence in a particular region, you have to team up with regions relatively mid to low, weaker to mid power against the stronger. Why? Because if you don't do this, you are going to risk the stronger becoming much stronger and potentially becoming a threat to you. This plays out in history throughout all time. It played out throughout the British Empire. It always is the case. And it was also part of the major philosophy of NATO. It was trying to be an obstacle to Russian expansionism. But now it's sort of like, on the one hand, we are being told that it doesn't function anymore, but on the other hand, it does function because it's a problem if Russia gains control of the Arctic route and of Greenland. So yes, there is, and Europeans need to be kicked in the ass, the European establishment. They need to stop this combination of relatively relaxed open borders and welfarism. Absolutely, they need to take their defense much more seriously. But it would be, I think, personally, I think it would be a pity if this sort of alignment between Europe and the US, which, yes, in some cases it has some cracks, if it cracked further. Because there are all sorts of geostrategic regions, apart from ideology and, let's say, relative kinship, that could bring together Europe and the US.
This is
so
good.
I totally get.
We need like a 2-hour conversation someday about this. Stelios, we're running out of time though, and I want to give you an opportunity to share with your audience about where they can find you online and anything that you would like to plug with our people today.
Yes, thank you very much. Right, so they can find me on X. It's Stelios Panagiotou. And I'm just working at the Lotus Eaters right now. And we're doing commentary, anti-wokeness, and so all sorts of commentary across the board. The best thing for people to look me out is my X account.
Yep, Stelios, you're my favorite of the Lotus Eaters. I do enjoy the podcast, and I'm deeply grateful that you take the time to share your thoughts with us. I hope our listeners will follow you, and thank you very much for this conversation. It's nice to have a good faith conversation instead of just people screaming at each other like Piers Morgan and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
have a wonderful evening over there in the UK, and good luck, Stelios.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. That's Stelios Panagiotou. Hope that I'm pronouncing that okay. That's Stelios, and I hope that you guys are enjoying the Wake Up America show today. We still got lots of great content left for you today, so do not leave the show. We have got Lou Perez joining us, the left's biggest self-own, not biggest cell phone, okay? Biggest cell phone were the body cameras for police. We'll talk about all that when we get back. Unlock that bonus content. Head over to the Grift Shop, forlibertyshop.com. We've raised $30 towards the $100 bonus content goals. We're a long way away, guys. Don't you want to see the bonus content? Head over to forlibertyshop.com. Buy yourself some Founding Flavors coffee. We'll be right back. It's the Wake Up America show on the For Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian and always has been.
Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. Good morning. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We're glad and thankful to have you here. If you haven't clicked the like button yet, please do so. If today's your first time watching the Wake Up America show, we'd love to earn your follow. The follow button underneath the video right now will send you notifications whenever we go live. And the show schedule is Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. So click the follow button so you can get a notification, come back and join us 5 days a week. You know, for years we were told that police body cameras were the great reform tool. Leftists and many libertarians, activists, they promoted that they would finally expose systemic racism, rampant abuse, and a supposedly out-of-control police culture. Now, cities spent millions, departments complied, officers wore the cameras, and then the footage started rolling. And then something very different happened. Over and over again, body cam footage showed not innocent victims randomly targeted by police, but volatile situations escalated by suspects who refused lawful orders, resisted arrest, or turned routine encounters into chaos. Maybe trying to run over police officers with cars. From traffic stops to domestic disputes to hotel room meltdowns, the cameras captured reality. The data backed it up. Complaints against police dropped. Use of force incidents declined. And body cam footage is now used overwhelmingly as evidence against civilians, not officers. In case after case, viral outrage collapses the moment the full footage is released. What was sold as a weapon against policing has instead become one of the many strong defenses of it. And that may be the greatest unintended the cell phone of the modern left. Joining me now is Lou Perez. He's been documenting this phenomenon in detail and calling it what it is, a complete narrative collapse for police reform. Lou's watched the footage, studied the data, and he joins us now. Good morning, Lou.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Self-own, you call it the greatest self-own, Lou. Why is that?
Yeah, so I think we all remember, back in the 2014, around that era, when there was big calls for police reform, especially from people who are outright anti-police activists, and they were calling for more body cams to be worn, and since then we've had about a decade. I can't think of anything that has hurt the anti-cop movement more than the very technology that they wanted police officers to wear. And I think in large part, I think body cam footage finally gave the public a real insight into the interactions that police officers have on the daily with citizens. And, let's not forget, on TV, if anyone grew up in the 90s, we had our show Cops. But Cops, I think, was a little different than what we're seeing now, in that Cops, like every TV show, was limited as far as which stories got told. There were commercial breaks and that sort of thing. But now, thanks to police body cam footage and Freedom of Information Acts and YouTube in particular, you have entire YouTube channels dedicated to just showing people incidents between cops and civilians, and it's really eye-opening for sure.
So body cams, they were kind of sold to the public as a way to expose racist policing. What do you think that the activists got most wrong about how this footage would actually change public perception?
Oh, I think when it came down to the use of force. I think, especially in recent years, there's been, quite a few incidents where, thankfully, we had body cam footage to show what actually happened between a police officer and, say, a suspect who, they ended up either having to kill. One example, I think, just recently there was a police officer was doing a welfare check on a woman. She was a African American woman, former Georgetown women's basketball player. He knocks on the door, and she comes out with a knife and starts slicing at him. And he's moving back, begging her, "Please drop the knife. Please drop the knife." And she basically gives him no choice other than to shoot her. And unfortunately, she was killed in the incident. And had we not had that body cam footage, the story would basically be police officer murders a former Georgetown women's basketball star. But when you see the footage, you see, for one, how insane the whole situation was, how scary it is. And you got to see the police officer who, had sustained, multiple knife wounds before eventually, deploying his gun and shooting her. So I think there have been, quite a few incidents that could have led to, the fiery but peaceful demonstrations that we saw during like, the 2020s. And thankfully, the footage was out there that people were like, oh, okay. This was a good shooting.
So how is a lot of times when you see some of these clips and they're posted on X, right? It's just a short clip, and those will shape public perception of body cams differently than the full footage does when it's released. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things of the times that we live in is that we do have access to all of this footage, all of this information, but in the same token, you'll see a clip, a 30-second clip, and you'll have no idea what happened 30 seconds before that camera started rolling, or the person, who ended up clipping it, decided to post it. So I think one of the negative things is sort of this knee-jerk reaction to what happens. And depending on which side of the, political spectrum you're in, you're like, ooh, this 30-second clip supports my side. Let me share it. Let me comment about it, as opposed to, doing, I think, what would probably be a more responsible thing of waiting for more information to come out, for more footage to come out before making a determination about, what happened.
But if we wait, Lou, then we don't get the clicks, and then I don't get my Elon Musk bucks. So that's a problem, because I live in the social media economy, and my money comes from outrage, rage bait.
Right. Well, and there's also, there really isn't too much, I guess, of a punishment for getting it wrong, right? We're kind of on to the next thing. You could, if you wanted, you could delete those tweets. Most people just keep them up. But yeah, it's something where, we have this ability to be a lot more vigilant. I think it's probably, definitely in our best interest to try to wait for more info to come out.
And I used to work at Fox, and when I did, that was when Roger Ailes was the president. He said it's better to be right than it is to be first, because you would pay a price at a network if you got something wrong. Your bosses would come down on you. But when you're like me, you don't have a boss. I'm my own boss. I do this. There's nobody to hold myself accountable. And when you build a cult following, if you've got a big enough cult following, Lou, you can interpret the data as you please. You can lie. No one will hold you accountable, and you'll still get rich. So how do we hold social media people like myself responsible when they do get it wrong?
Well, I think you have to, I guess, get in the comments section, right? You got to get into the quote tweeting and calling people out. And I think, over the years, there are a lot of people out there who have, risked a lot by, trying not to be first and, would rather be right. And I think if people, have those, if you see those voices out there, definitely try to uplift them and share their stuff. Because I think ultimately, all of us are trying to follow people who we trust, people who we know are trying to do a good job. And I think in a similar way with a lot of these police encounters that we're able to see, for the most part, police officers they're pulling over strangers. They have no idea what's going to happen. And from what I've seen, and I consume these videos, it's like my new form of my favorite entertainment. I do see police officers trying to do their best in the situation. And then the people they're pulling over, say, for example, escalating things for practically no reason at all. I mean, the amount of the examples of someone like rolling through a stop sign, right? And they could have just gotten, driven away with an easy, like a citation. And then instead of that, they escalate the situation and ramp it up to where they're catching a felony charge.
Or a bullet.
I don't know. Yeah, felony charge or a bullet. It's like, I'm glad I don't have to deal with those people on the daily.
Yeah, exactly. No, I see those videos now and I think, oh God, I would never want to be a cop. That is the most difficult, dirty, having to put your hands on all those nasty people all the time. It's just, it would be hell. But and I know that you may be looking for podcasters and social media people that are telling the truth and that you can trust. I'm trying to find the craziest bastards that I can who will give me all the conspiracy theories that I enjoy and confirm all my biases about aliens and psychic phenomena. But however, to each his own. Now, here's the thing, Lou, we live in libertarian world, right? So we come from the group of people who were like with the left and advocating for these body cameras, right? Outlets like Reason and libertarian commentators, we have historically supported body cams as an accountability tool in policing. But in hindsight, do you think that support leaned too far towards the leftist activist narrative of systemic abuse by police? And should libertarians perhaps rethink that?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, being a libertarian, I mean, we definitely have more of like kind of an anti-cop, streak to us. And, if anything, like watching, body cam footage has definitely made me less anti-cop for sure. One of the realities that I've just sort of, had to, come to grips with is that, bad people are out there, and whether they have to, whether they're coming into contact with agents of the state, or private citizens. They are out there, and it's just a reality that we have to deal with. I mean, I think one thing though, no matter where you're coming from, whatever your motivations were when it came to calling for more police body cams, I think libertarians in particular are interested in truth. I think interested in wanting to know what's actually happening. They're curious about that. That might be why we kind of maybe sometimes lean towards more the conspiratorial side. Where it's like, what are they hiding from us? And I think overall, body cams have sort of opened up the world and the the levels of knowledge. It's like, okay, we have a much better idea of what's actually happening. So I think overall, it's been a positive, and I think it's something where. It's a good thing that libertarians having to kind of question their foundations too.
I think so, but it's Reason, similar outlets, like they often treated police encounters as a civil liberties problem rather than a social order problem, right? So did that framing unintentionally align us with activists who were hostile not just to abuse but to policing itself?
I think so. Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to put it. And one thing also, in my I guess my earlier, more anti-authoritarian days, my more anti-policing days, if I was pulled over by a police officer, I was very respectful. I wasn't looking to escalate the situation, right? And part of it was, self-preservation. I think if you have this idea that, the state is out to get you in a way, like at the worst, like the state's out to get you. This agent of the state is going to murder me. Well, I would be very, very careful on how I interact with that person. And something that I'm seeing here is, there was a time where you would often hear about, say, for example, like African-American parents having, quote, the talk with their children about how to interact with a police officer, be respectful, et cetera. Don't fight a cop. You would hear that. And I'm watching these videos and I'm like, is anybody having the talk anymore with their kids? Because it's really wild just to see how easily people are willing to, put hands on somebody who has a gun. And it's just, it's not a good idea. And maybe, like you and I are, of similar ages, the idea that I would, especially if you're like open carrying, that, okay, I'm going to start pushing around Austin because when he has a gun. It would be a really stupid move on my part.
Yeah, it happens. I've seen it. Well, talk to us about this story, though, in the background of the shooting of Renee Good, because I have had a lot of libertarians launching themselves at me in recent days for suggesting that if you F around, you might find out that if you try and drive a vehicle at someone who's open carrying, whether they be police officer or whether it's Austin Peterson, you might get shot. Is there some... what's the disconnect here with people who claim the mantle of libertarianism and there's such disparate opinions on this? Talk to us about this in the context of Renee Good.
Yeah, one of the things I think that's been sort of lacking over the past, I think we're coming on like 2 weeks since she was killed, is I don't see a lot of people calling for, protesters or activists to stop doing what they're doing, to stop, blocking ICE, ICE agents or other federal agents' cars. Like, stop putting your body on the line there. And I would think that after an incident like that, you would hear more people saying like, hey, this is a really bad idea. But we're not seeing that. And, what's interesting too is I was actually the other night, my wife and I went to a friend's birthday party, and we carpooled, and we rode in a Honda Pilot, which was the car that Renee Good was driving when she was shot. I'd never been in a Honda Pilot before, and I was amazed at I'm like, wow, this is a really big car. This is a big, heavy vehicle, and I don't know what it is about sort of the people who were saying that it was so ridiculous that this officer was the ICE agent was afraid of getting hit by this giant truck right? Like that's a crazy idea, like that he would be afraid of getting hit by a truck. But yet the same people will see footage of, say, a protester being pushed to the ground and say, like, how the hell can you do that? So I think there seems like just like this complete imbalance or lack of knowledge when it comes to violence and how easily it is to hurt somebody, especially when it comes to, if somebody's behind the wheel of a vehicle.
Yeah, it does. It also just reminds me a little bit that there are people who, protected by the nonprofit status and living in these cities, Lou, they are completely sort of divorced from the reality on the ground, that the people who are activists, who are in the streets, the way that they see it, and then the people who live in these communities where all of this fraud and all of this illegal immigration, where they're being impacted by these communities, how they might actually feel by this. So, I mean, you have the professional activists on one hand, whether they be libertarian writers at Reason or whether they be, activists at Roots magazine or, what's the other leftist magazine, Jacobin magazine or something like that. And they have no contact. They never are questioned, like you were talking about earlier, right? They're never questioned. They never have to revise their opinions. But people like yourself who kind of, I don't know if you work for any institution or if you get nonprofit bucks, but if you don't, then you know what it means to have to eat what you kill. You're responsible in a way that the professional activists are not. And do you think that impacts the coverage that we read? I mean, you've written an excellent article over at Pirate Wires, and I trust what you say more because you're not necessarily professionally, you're not being paid by an institution to advance a point of view. But do you think that there is a lot of that's narrative farming that goes on because people are sort of divorced from what's actually happening in these communities, and then also they're being paid to advance a narrative? Whereas you even said earlier, you're like, in my anti-cop days, you seem to have matured and taken a different point of view than you used to, but also you're not being paid to advance your opinions necessarily from an institution that's designed to motivate you to frame things a certain way, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. I want to make it clear, if anybody out there, wants me to shill for them, or, you just hit me up in the DMs and make your offer. I do tend to believe that, generally speaking, it's a lot easier for people to write what they actually believe, and I guess it's helpful when they're able to, get a paycheck to do that. One of the things that I do notice, sort of like in the nonprofit space, is that a lot of groups who talk about, sort of winning out in the marketplace of ideas tend to be working for nonprofits. And it's like, well, I guess you're not really, winning out in the marketplace of ideas, if you're being bankrolled.
You've got several millionaires and maybe a billionaire or two who are completely bankrolling your institution.
Yeah. But, with that being said, I generally, generally I take people at their word that if they're putting something out there, they actually believe this. So giving them the benefit of the doubt and responding to those, to their beliefs with, genuine criticism, I think is the way to go. One thing that I do notice in a lot of like the immigration debate, and I'm going to say, I'm a son of an immigrant, and a lot of the examples that I would see, especially like in the New York Times and that sort of thing, you'd have these examples of ICE agents taking this undocumented immigrant out, and it sounds really horrible, and then you get to like the fifth paragraph and you find out, oh yeah, well he's been arrested for, X, Y, or Z. And I think it's just like a bad, just from a PR standpoint, it's a really bad idea if the people that you're protecting happen to be bad people. There's a clip that was talking about clips that were going around of an ICE agent, driving in his truck, and he stops and he starts speaking to, an activist there. And he's like, we're trying to arrest a guy who, sexually assaulted a child. Like that's the guy that you're honking your horns and blowing whistles and all that. Like, we're trying to get this guy, and that's who you're trying to protect. So I think from a PR standpoint, it's sort of like, do the research too, as far as, who are the figures going to be of your movement.
Yeah, no kidding. Actually, as a matter of fact, I have that clip right here.
Reporter arrest a child sex offender. And you guys are out here honking.
Oh, they're not. No, we're pressed. We're not.
That vehicle right there is honking and impeding our investigations while we're trying to arrest a child sex offender. That's who you guys are protecting. Insane.
I wish I had someone who looked at me the way that middle-aged liberal white females look at child sex offender illegal immigrants in Minnesota. It's kind of sick and twisted and sadistic, Lou, because there is a legitimate role for immigration enforcement when it involves people who come here and commit crimes. Now, maybe we could say that, Jose Nunez, who goes and picks strawberries on the farm, maybe he needs to pay a fine and get to the back of the line. But we're talking about people who are actual violent criminals here, Lou, and there are people who are trying to prevent us from doing the proper role of policing. What should our response be to that, Lou? What should our messaging be to counter their anti-cop, anti-ordered liberty views?
What should the message be? Well, I mean, one thing that I've sort of discovered is I might not be the messenger of anything. I might actually turn people against. I might turn people against my own message if I speak out. I mean, one thing though, I think understanding the complications of immigration, how complicated of an issue it is, where you have one of the reasons why you have like these, kind of door to door, knockings happening is because so many of, criminals, weren't taken out from court, so it's sort of like, somebody like undocumented people were, found guilty and then they were kind of let go, in these blue cities. So I think, if the blue cities had actually stepped up and said, okay, this guy is obviously a criminal, we're making sure we're doing everything to keep him out, I think that would send a message to, the feds to say, okay, we're actually working to get rid of the people that I guess nobody would want in their country.
Lou, I guess I'm like you. I think I do sometimes turn people off from my own cause from the way that I advance these ideas. So we'll go ahead and cut it off there. Lou, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience on this topic, maybe that we missed, or perhaps you'd like to plug something, a website or something you'd like to share before we let you go today?
Yeah, if you enjoy my work, you can check me out at Lou Perez on Substack. That's a great place. And also, if you haven't checked out, police body cam stuff on YouTube, do it. Some of the best filmmaking is actually being done with police body cams. It's a great genre.
There we go. Lou Perez. Hey, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, Lou. Great writing over at Pirate Wires. I dropped the link in the chat. If anybody else needs it and can't find it, they can reach out to me and I'll make sure they get over there. Lou, have a wonderful day and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks, man.
Thank you. That's Lou Perez. I hope that you all enjoyed the Wake Up America show today and our special guests that we have. I'm always working extremely hard to try and bring you the absolute best coverage, the best guests, the best news topics, so that you can stay informed, maybe have a little bit of fun as well before you start your day. Did you enjoy the Wake Up America show today? Torvarin, CO Day, T-Mill22? I think CO Day did. I saw Cecilia's 1776 Peterson's Patriot donation came in today. Thank you, Cecilia, and to everyone else who are members of our Peterson's Patriots programs. We didn't unlock the bonus content today, but that's okay because we'll unlock it tomorrow. Don't worry about it, guys. We appreciate all your financial support throughout the year, and we couldn't do it without you. Really quick, just want to let you know that we're going to do a raid this morning on somebody else's stream. So if you want to stick around and check out which stream we are going to raid, then definitely make sure you guys hang out because we're going to do a quick stream raid so that we can get our raids in before the end of the month, because that's how we stay in our Rumble creator program. Thank you to Rumble. And we'll see you guys soon. Imagine bringing George Washington back to life. Just to explain that, in 2025, men can get pregnant, waving an American flag might offend someone, and our government is $34 trillion in debt. But that's not all, George. We have drag queen story hour for toddlers. Pronouns are mandatory. And Harvard can't define woman. Oh,
And we send billions to Ukraine but can't fix potholes in Ohio.